of people who didn't necessarily know each other, but we were able to work together and establish something that's pretty astonishing. So, on our panel we have Roger Alvarado. We have Carmen Carrillo. Nesbit Crutchfield. Quidachay, Wong, and we all represented different organizations and different reasons that we came to San Francisco State, and we all ended up working together to create this amazing institution. So, Roger, would you like to start?
Thank you. I wanted to talk about self-determination and the impact that it had on the campus. I was working in the tutorial program and began to listen to some of the speeches that were being made in the civil rights movement. In particular, Malcolm X, when he started talking about self-determination. And one of the things that was significant about that is the way in which he was talking. It applied to everybody, not just to black people. The other aspect that came into play as far as the work that I was doing had to do with the recognition of the dignity of people of color, in particular black people, and the work that was being done in the neighborhoods by the tutorial program with the black community. At this time, the composition of the tutorial program was over 25 people working on the program in over 25 locations in the city. Altogether, there was over 800 people that were connected with the program who were either volunteers or working in the program and the students that they were assisting. When the notion of black people doing things for themselves and determining their own destiny came about, the majority of the people in the tutorial program who were white had a great deal of difficulty in realizing and appreciating this concept. There was the liberalism of, well, I'm here to support the civil rights of anybody. But when it came down to recognizing the right of people to determine for themselves their own destiny, and to be the ones who would dictate what it was that was going to be done and who was going to do it for them, this became a real struggle. We spent from 64 through 66 going through this issue. It wasn't until the summer of 66 when the group sat down every afternoon after the kids had gone back home. And we would go through the discussion for 2.5 months. Nearly half of the staff quit at the end of that time because they would not go along with the notion of black people being able to determine their own destiny, essentially. It was the liberal notion of being able to participate in something regardless of what the people that they were affecting wanted to do. At that point, the program was turned, and 3 people took over the guardianship of the program. The coordinators became Bob Williams, Tom Williams, and George Murray. Tom and George were black, Bob was white. The program then went on to continue to participate in the special admissions program, which we had developed in the tutorial program a 1.5 years earlier, which enabled us to bring 25 students onto the campus as incoming freshmen under exceptional status that was provided by the president by the CSU system, which enabled the president to allow 1.6 of the incoming students to be admitted under special admissions. As the years went on after the program was instituted, the numbers were increased and eventually became known as the EOP. The other programs that I was involved in had to do with work study. Not the work study that was funded by the state. It was a work study program that put people in the particular field that they were studying, in which they were able to receive credit, but on an independent basis. They didn't have to go to class, they had to go to work. And along with that work, they would have to meet with the professor in order to review what they were doing and what their progress was, and so forth, to move forward with their education. One of the curious things about this is that the administration became interested in it. And the Dean of Undergraduate Studies, John Shee, hired me to coordinate the work-study program for the administration. I bring this up because in talking about the different things that are out there and the different ways in which you can approach ideas that you have, work that you're involved in, or directions that you want to go, you don't want to exclude anybody. You want to look at everybody as a potential at some level or another to assist you in where you want to go. Doesn't mean that they have to do the same thing that you do. But if you can work together and take advantage of the positions that people have and where they are, you can really be effective in putting together the energy that you need and your ideas in order to make something happen. I think one of the proofs of that is on the campus right now, and it's called the Community Involvement Program. The Community Involvement Program was run by Del Sorensen, and it was one of the student-funded programs in the 60s that were put up by the student money and run by students. But if I'm not mistaken, everything was dissolved in the middle of the strike and after the strike, right? And the Community Involvement Program did not surface again until at least 10 or 12 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But my point is, the validity of the work was undeniable to the point that the program had to be brought back. And I would say the same thing is true in terms of the work-study program, in terms of the tutorial programs. This is what I kind of think I was talking about earlier when I said how important it is to realize the potential, the real potential that's even sitting in this room for doing things that have a direct impact on your communities. And that in order to get there, it's important to sit down, look at what's out there, look at what's available to you, look who share your interests, and then find some way to come together and do something. I mean, okay. Yeah, it's just, literally, I mean, this, you've got to believe in yourselves. You've got to believe in yourself. You have to believe that what you're going through is not just you and you alone. You're sharing an experience now with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And quite frankly, I can't figure out why the fuck you don't do anything. I mean, that's the way I feel, you know. To think about paying this kind of what you're paying for and what you're getting, you know, those two things don't come together for me. And I don't see how they can come together for you. And so that's going to be one of my questions for you. You know, when we have time afterwards, it's like, where are you at?
Thank you, Roger. It was brought up in the earlier panel that the cost for us to go to school, well, I remember $48 a semester. Somebody else remembered $64 a semester, but it wasn't thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a semester. So our next speaker is Carmen Carrillo. Would you like to tell them about the Latin American Student Organization and the TWLF?
Sure, I'd love to. Buenos dias, good morning. Aloha. I came to San Francisco State as a graduate student. I had come from Berkeley, where I did an undergraduate degree in psychology. And I found out that with an undergraduate degree in psychology, all I could do was sell shoes. So many people, I had the benefit of a lot of supporting the community and the Latino community of the Mission District, and people were urging me to, continue my education, go do something else. So I came to State, and I was very glad to see that at State there were a lot of people who were similar to me, who had aspirations, who had the thought of social justice as paramount in whatever they were doing, whatever field they were in. Quick question, how many of you are in psychology? Psych majors. Okay, very few. But probably sociology. How about sociology? Anthropology? Okay. Follow-up question. When you read your textbooks, do you see yourself in the textbooks? Do you find your families in the textbooks? Well, that's a big change for those of you who say yes, because when I was going to school, we weren't in the textbooks. We weren't in the textbooks, we weren't, available as, we didn't have role models, we didn't have people who we could aspire to ask questions that were relevant to our lives. And so at State, for me, it was very exciting that there were Latinos, because at Berkeley, we were like a handful at that time. And so we were very closely allied with the Black students on campus at Berkeley. We participated in the free speech movement. We participated in the anti-war movement, but we were never prominent because we were minorities within minorities. But when I came to State, I was very glad to see that there was a lot of spirit. People wanted to do things and people wanted to change. Now, it wasn't just us. In the prior panel, the question was asked, who are we, or who defines who we are? And that's a critical question, because the state apparatus, wants to define who we are, by developing a plan for education for the state and by putting us in various segments where we should fit in order to serve the needs of the state and of the corporate world. But who are we really? We are, in the Latino community at that time, on the campus, we were a small group. We were 2.8% of the student body. And we came from all sorts of places. There were people who came from New Mexico, who said they were Spanish, and there were people who came from Central America and from South America, who spoke great Spanish, and there were the baby boomers like us who, some of us spoke Spanish and some didn't, because the forces of assimilation said you have to drop your old life and, get into the new groove and drop your culture and assimilate into the next one. So we were a really diverse group. And how could we come together? Well, we started to come together with two small organizations, the Mexican American Student Confederation and LASO, which was a Latin American student organization. And the organizations were small and sometimes had overlapping memberships, like I would, swing from one to the other. And sometimes had different goals. The MASC was more oriented towards, towards looking at, student recruitment, student retention, and looking at participating in outside movements like the United Farm Workers and other movements in the community. And LASO had more of an internationalist approach, understanding that there were other things going on in our countries of origin. It wasn't easy because, country of origin situation is always complicated. The Colombians, lost Panama because the imperialists wanted to build a canal. The Salvadorians had a soccer war with Honduras because of shifting borders. Mexico took Chiapas and Tabasco from Guatemala because the Tabascans were not happy. And all of this, gets translated through generations. And it ended up with us who didn't have necessarily a unifying thread, except when we began to work in organizations. And those organizations then also started to work with other ethnic and racial groups to form the Third World Liberation Front. It was not easy. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It wasn't an easy coming together, but in fact, I mentioned we were 2.8% of the student population. We were 6% of the students arrested in the strike. Once we decided to participate, we participated at all levels. Roger, the spokesperson, was prominent in the strike, and everybody else participated in different capacities. But we did it with conviction. We did it putting our bodies on the line. We were arrested. I had never been in jail before. I thought I wouldn't be able to practice as a psychologist, but I did it because I believed in it. And I thought one has to stand for one's principles. One has to be willing to sacrifice, if need be, in order to move our whole community, not just our ethnic racial community, but the whole community, to move forward and to make for social change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmen. Our next speaker is Nesbit Crutchfield, who was part of the BSU. He was part of the whole thing here. So Nesbit, will you talk about some of the things that you did with relation to the Third World Liberation Front?
Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's really important for you to know that that every person that's sitting on this stage right now were members of the Central Committee of the Third World Liberation Front. Every one of us. There's only one person that I see is missing who attended meetings regularly, and that was Al Wong. Al Wong is not here with us. He's really busy. We love him very much and we miss him. But this is the Central Committee of the Third World Liberation Front. I say that because I think it's important for you to realize that the things you read about the Third World Liberation Front and the Black Student Union, what have you, you need to see it from the standpoint of its reality rather than from its spirit. And the 6 of us, or the 7 of us that are here, are the reality of the Third World Liberation Front. I want to, I'm going to talk a little longer than Roger or Carmen. I don't know why they only spoke so short, but I prepared 5 minutes. So I'm going to take up all 5 of my minutes. During this time, 1966, 67, 68, was a time of anti-imperialist raves. That is to say that anti-imperialism was sprouting out all over the world. You had you had Africa in the name of South Africa, the ANC. You had Angola, you had Mozambique. You had Vietnam in the name of the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong people. You had Latin America in the name of Cuban sovereignty, the sovereignty of the Nicaraguan people, and the up-and-coming battles of the people of Venezuela and Colombia. You had also oppression in the black communities and the communities of color. You had cops going into these communities and whipping people, beating people, killing people. Black people, brown people, yellow people, and poor white people. And these things were taking very important notice in these communities. And you also had the Palestinian situation. Yes, I'm talking about the same Palestinian situation that we're talking about today, that Professor Rabi talked about earlier today in reference to Ahmed. You had those same issues in reference to Israel and Zionism and how they were oppressing the Palestinian people back in those times. So this is what happened was this affected us. I'm talking about black people, people of color, and working class white people. It affected us because we took notice of it. We began to see our commonalities, and it infused and affected every aspect of our life, including the times that we went to school, be it elementary school, secondary school, college, or universities. The effect that this situation and this environment had in reference to organizing on black people was that we saw it as necessary. Hear me now. We saw it necessary for us to eliminate the myth of elitist and higher education. To the extent that what we did was we utilized the Economic Opportunity Program and CETA and other programs that existed to bring as many black people, people of color, and working class white people into this institution as possible, and to have them understand that education is a transitional, evolutionary process. It is not a process that you, because of the amount of melanin you have in your skin, makes you either smarter or less smart. That this is the issue of demand, it's an issue of supply, it's an issue of what type of opportunity do you have to deal with educating yourself. Then we talk about what's happening in other communities of color. You had LASO, you had Jim Queen and the Potrero Hill organizing. You had various different people in various different organizations in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, representing people of color, coming together and dealing with their commonality, that is to say, the oppression of the settler colonialists that were dominating our community. So what happened at state? What decision was made, or how did it happen that the BSU and the Third World Liberation Front came together? I'm going to talk about something that I don't think has ever been talked about before. And that is to say that the Central Committee of the Black Student Union was composed of two major elements. One being internationalists, Pan-Africanist internationalists, in the name of the two prime people representing that ideology was Terry Collins, who's sitting to my extreme left, and myself. And you had other people representing what we call now cultural nationalism, which basically stated that if you were black, then there was a certain extraordinary understanding, extraordinary place that we placed, I got 1 minute, that we placed for you, and that everything abided by that. There was a very intense battle within the Central Committee of the Black Student Union as to which side would prevail. Luckily, the internationalist side prevailed. That's the reason why we today are sitting here on the stage. That's the reason why we today are celebrating 50 years of this strike that closed the school down, because we realized that we had more in common as people of color, as black people, and as working class white people than we had to divide us. Lastly, I'm not through yet, but I have to say this. Lastly, it was important for us to learn to know each other, learn to trust each other, learn to allow each other to speak for each other. And this came with time, this came with patience, this came with a certain amount of growth of understanding. It was very, very difficult. It didn't just happen like that. It took a very difficult, arduous, concentrated effort on all of our parts to learn that what kept us together was our commonality, and what would divide us was allowing people to use our differences to keep us apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Nesbit. I neglected to say earlier, we had a representative from the American Indian student group that was unable to come today. He had to do a deposition. This is Patrick Guillory, and we're sorry that he couldn't be here. Our next speaker, Ron Quidachay, who was part of the organization PACE. Ron?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ron Quidachay. I'm also a judge of the Superior Court of San Francisco, which I've been for the last 38 years. And when I think back, last Friday I was sitting on the bench, and if I had this many people in front of me, it would mean there was a complex case and we were trying to pick a jury that was probably going to take, I don't know, probably 2 months or something like that. Most of you would be let go and going to school. But in any case, let me get to the point. What you've heard, much of what I've heard in the last month or two and from the panelists, are coming from persons who represent groups or are persons who themselves are very politically astute. And they were very politically astute 50-something years ago. That was not true of the Filipino students on the campus, not everybody. Let me ask, how many people here are current members of PACE? Anybody? Okay, good to know. Good to know. And let me say this right now. For those of you who are members of PACE, the person responsible for its formation, Patrick Alvarado. Patrick passed away about a couple of months ago, August. And but Patrick was one of the persons. He was the person who would go around the cafeteria. We used to call it the Commons. And he would have this leaflet, that long, which actually states the positions that you've been hearing today. And he'd walk around and he says, "Are you Filipino?" And if you said yes, "Oh, you're a member of PACE, here." And then he would also give you an application. And when a lot of people read this, which is a very radical statement in the eyes of many, because when you look at the Filipino students on the campus at that time, we had about 80, but some of them were students here on visas. So, you know, today you hear all about the immigration problems. Those persons who were here on immigrant visas, education visas, they had to be concerned about what they did. And the others come from families that are relatively conservative. And I was a little bit different. I grew up on the island of Wong. I'm a native San Franciscan. I grew up on the island of Wong. But when I came here, when I was 17 years old in 1964 to go to SF State, I suddenly discovered I had all these Filipino relatives because I grew up thinking I'm Chamorro and I'm Irish. My mother never told me you have all these Filipino relatives. And then I find out I'm half Filipino. So when I found that out, and Patrick comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Ron, are you Filipino?" I says, "Well, I'm sort of half caste, you know. My mother's Irish, my father's Filipino. Doesn't make any difference. You're in PACE." and so at that particular point, myself, Patrick, Bob Lumen, and Alex Soria, we were the persons who said, "Okay, we're willing to make some commitment." We said, "We agree with the statements here, but not necessarily in that format." The other persons did not. In any event, PACE got formed then. Simultaneous was this organization, TWLF and BSU, and they are moving along very fast. Patrick, myself, and the others, we decided we're going to be a part of the TWLF. And there's a steering committee. But not, as might be assumed, we all agreed on everything all the time? No way. And they had this manifesto that they put out, which, you know, you really needed uniformity, you needed 100% consensus. So I actually found, I'm a pack rat, I found some notes from October 11, PACE notes. And what it shows to me is of 5 of demands. We had debate as to whether or not we were going to accept these demands. And I won't go through which ones we did not like. Everybody said ethnic studies. That was a group, 100% said yes. Juan Martinez, Professor Martinez, who was actually our advisor. Some question about Professor Martinez. George Murray, another one, where there are votes, but they are not unanimous. And then special admissions. And one of the things that I thought was missed this morning when Mr. Persico spoke was, he talked about the AFRTC demonstration. But from our perspective, it was special admissions. It was not. It was so that we could get students in from the Filipino community and the others. So in the end, what happened was we went ahead and as things occurred, we moved closer and closer to agreeing on all of it, and we did. And she's giving me a minute now. Let me say this. The consequences were astronomical. The Secret Service, as somebody said earlier today, had every one of our names. I know because I went to Guam, and President Nixon was going to Guam, and the Secret Service came to my parents' house. And I wanted to know why I was on Guam. I was only there to visit my parents, because I had had a very serious motorcycle accident. And let me finish this. So I had been the chair of the TWLF the prior semester. The day of registration for the semester of the strike, I had a serious motorcycle accident and with major brain injury and so on and so forth. And I was in the hospital for a couple of months. And then my neurosurgeon said, look, you have 2 choices. You can either go to a convalescent home or you can go to SF State. because it'll bring back some of your memory. I have patients and stuff like that. Because I've been very involved. So one of the reasons you don't see much of me in all these films is because I was sort of like Roger is now. I had no hair, but I had a beard and I had a white helmet. And Jesus Contreras, from LASO, he was really my protector. He would walk me around and say, Ron, you can't get hit in the head. You know, you've already got a brain injury. In any event, we formed, and I will tell you, it had major consequences going on through all of our lives that were involved. Let me acknowledge some people, and then I'll end. Professor Gonzalez, Dan Gonzalez. I don't know where Danny is. Danny came in under the, maybe I should be saying this, Danny was a special ed student. He didn't need it, but he came in. Juanita Tamayo was a person who really did a lot of work. Ed Dela Cruz, another person who did, and he's a community favorite Ed. He's passed away. Virgie Evangelista, Orby Jonas. There were a lot of people there, but they were not willing to. They didn't want to get arrested because they still had to tell their parents. People like myself and a few others, our parents were like 4,000 miles away. Why would they care? Anyway, that's how PACE got involved, and I hope that I'm able to say hi to some of you who are currently in PACE. I probably went to school with your grandparents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I have this dreaded 1 minute left paper just to make sure that we can come out at the end and have some time for questions. Our next speaker is Mason Wong, and Mason and Carmen were 2 of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit to void the arrest, so that the almost 700 people who were arrested were able to go on and be judges and psychologists and all of the other things that we wanted to do, because back when we went to state, there was something called like an oath of allegiance that had to be signed. Yes, and if you did something wrong, then you could be kicked out, and that's what happened to a lot of folks here. So, Mason, would you like to tell us about the Intercollegiate Chinese organization?
Okay, thank you. Before I begin, I just want to let you know that one time I appeared before Ron.
Did I put you in jail?
No, you excused me from jury duty. I finished San Francisco City College, got my AA degree, and then came to San Francisco State. I got involved with ICSA because at that time I lived in Chinatown, and there was awareness of the growing youth problem that we had. And my dad, he had a restaurant in Chinatown, so they would be open till 4 in the morning. And get involved with all the activity. So I started going to ICSA meetings. So when they said Intercollegiate Chinese for Social Action, I thought it was a much more progressive group. And I just found out from George Wu that it has been around for many years, and that it's actually a social group to go to have parties. So they can have dances and meet girls and things like that. The major issue that was confronting the ICSA was whether or not ICSA as an organization would support La Raza position on Juan Martinez to be given a position here at San Francisco State. And so I was watching the meetings, and Maureen was there, and there was a faction of the members of the group who were actually Chinese Americans. The social people were more like Chinese immigrants or coming here on student visas. So their involvement was very limited to what they could do. So I ran into Al. Al and I've known him ever since I was in junior high school. We're old drinking buddies. So I said, hey Al, I want you to come to this meeting, because Al was very much involved with SNCC. So when he came to the meeting and he started seeing what's happening, we got together with a bunch of the other students who were in favor of La Raza, and then they said, okay, it's time for elections. So I'm just sitting there, and next minute Al's pointing at me and says, you're president. So I became the reluctant president of ICSA. Once I became president, we stayed in our position with La Raza. And then we met with Benny Stewart. Benny came on his own, he came with a group of people, and we were meeting in a classroom. And that's what our first connection, I think, was at that time. And I think it was very important, because here's a situation where you had Chinese American students getting involved with the black community. And my involvement with the blacks was very limited, except when I was in the service. I had some black sergeants who took me under their wing and helped guide me through my service time in the Marines. And at that time, before I was getting out, there were some Marines getting involved in the civil rights movement, and the higher-ups in the Marine Corps were getting nervous about the situation. So when I got out, I come to San Francisco State, and we got involved. Got involved in the strike, and it just took a life of its own. I mean, it was tough, because one thing I hate is going to meetings. And when you get third world people to talk, it just never ends. But it was a good learning experience for me. I learned to adapt. And to this day, many of these people have become very dear friends of mine. So that's my story.
Man, Mason, you shaved minutes off there.
Can I have them?
Well, let's see. We go to 1:30 or 1:45? Okay. We're doing good. Okay, our last speaker is Terry Collins, and Terry is, to those of us who've known him for many years, is an amazing, magical person. He's definitely the internationalist, one of the internationalists in the beginning, and still I've learned from him. I think we all have for many years. So, Terry, take it away.
I hope I can make sense. Well,
Closer to the mic, move the mic closer.
well, when I came here, I was hanging out, just hanging around. I had joined the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And so I didn't know anything, I had no intention of coming to school. I just was happy to come out here hanging out. And Alvarado approached me and asked me if I want to come to school. I said, what do you mean? He said, you want to come to school? I said, I can come to school. I mean, I hadn't put no application in. He said, come on. He took me to summer skills office and said, summer skill. I got a comrade here, I went to school. And I was in school. So I said, man, what happened? He said, you in school. So I said, how can I get me some money? Because I got to have some money. Work study, what's that? Work study is you can work in the community and get paid. I said, what? He said, yeah. I said, wow. I mean, man, you know, I'm with you. What do you want me to do? I said, I don't want you to do nothing. You just serve the people. I said, all right. So basically, what happened was that when I approached BSU, it was Benny Stewart was the chair, Jerry Bernardo was the off-campus coordinator, Jimmy Garrett was the on-campus coordinator, and Gloria Lowry, a Filipino sister, was a secretary. So in other words, already I approached BSU, and they had 3 people, and one of them was Filipino in charge. So automatically, I started thinking, I mean, I've been, one of the things I was in the Army, both me and Crutchfield was in the Army. I got discharged in the Army over in Germany and wandered around for about 3-4 years. The last place I stayed in office was in Morocco for about 6 months. But what happened was that I was put in a situation where I felt I was older than everybody. I was 31 years old. So I felt that I can try to apply some of this. But I'll try to make sense. So I got there. To me, I didn't want to go. I was in the Army, and I organized in the Army. I just didn't want no one person, 2 people to give me orders. So I felt that we needed a better organization. So I thought in terms of a central committee. And the Central Committee also thinking in terms of another area we call it the Presidium. Instead of Politburo, because that right there might have been doing too radical, Presidium. So we had an election, the black students had an election, and they appointed, I mean, these women and men appointed mostly all men to the Central Committee, which I felt was kind of confusing. So the Presidium, we made sure the Presidium had women, and the Presidium mostly had overwhelmingly, I think, women. And they were the ones that chose the cadre, went and organized the cadre, the warriors, the fighters, the women. So basically, when we were internationalists, we also thought in terms of, if we are international, Ms. Crutchfield, we did have a struggle, that we had to reach out to others. In fact, our sponsor was Juan Martinez. He was the sponsor of the BSU because we had a brother named Larry, he kept representing a psychologist, and he kind of drove me crazy. So Juan had to come up and be our sponsor. So after that, I think what happened was that we began to work to develop the TWF, because like I said, we was internationalists, we had put together the Central Committee, so we felt that we had to bring somebody else in. But we didn't have to because Roger Alvarado was already there, hooked me up to go out to the mission. We went out to the mission. We used to go out there to the mission, or go out to Chinatown, or go to Hunters Point, and grab somebody. Youngsters. You know, we used to grab these youngsters, say, man, you gotta go to school. The first thing they say, yeah, well, can I give you some money? Yeah, we'll give you some money. And the work study was created by his person, we call him Joe Person, with him, controversial. He's the one that created that, work study and all that stuff. He's the way ahead of us all. So we came and we started the Revolution Front. And in the beginning it was hard. Pace, I was doing draft counseling. Didn't know what I was doing, but I came up here at Alvarado Dean's house. I was doing draft counseling. And later on we had on Page Street, we had a draft counseling. So we began working on the Revolution River because we are internationalists and we hooked up, as Crutchfield said, with struggles of the rest of the world. I mean, Africa, Asia, Latin America. I mean, or South America, because I don't want to call Latin America. People of the sun, I call it people of the sun. And so with that, we began this struggle. But mind you this, it was always related to community. Here was a place we felt we needed to develop our theory. In fact, we all carried red books. Ramona still got hers probably. So that red book, believe me, taught us a lot. It quoted the Mao Zedong. Y'all should, I'm surprised it would be difficult to get a red book now. But it's very important for the black student movement. In fact, as Jimmy Garrett said, Mao Zedong wrote us a letter congratulating us. Mao Zedong, we got a letter from Mao Zedong. So basically, I got 1 minute left. Okay, I'm just trying this up.
All right.
Thank you, Terry. Now I'd like to open this up for questions. If you have a question for the whole panel, one person, there will be people with microphones. Come on, somebody has a question.
While we have questions, can I add something here?
Oh, yes, you may.
Because we were talking at the last panel. The last panel was talking about who are we and who names us. Why are we the Third World Liberation Front? And why isn't this the Third World Liberation College? The Third World Liberation Front arose out of our solidarity with the people of the Third World who were oppressed, who were colonized, who were, just taken over by all the large powers. And they met in Bandung and had a conference and they called themselves Third World. And we were in solidarity with those nations and with those people who were fighting oppression. And that's why we became the Third World Liberation Front. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. This is more so towards Ron. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I really like what you said about pace and other things about like Filipinos and our culture as a whole. You mentioned one thing about how Filipinos are predominantly conservative.
Certainly, is that the question or what?
No, I just wanted to say that now I feel like a lot of Filipinos are conservative because in the recent 2016 elections, I read somewhere that Chinese and Filipinos voted for Trump significantly more than other Asian populations. And I wanted to know, as students and people who are going to be, voting for the rest of our lives, what can we do to help, I guess, change our parents? Question mark?
There's something that I wrote a number of years ago, and this is what I said to students 40 years ago. It's in some manual or some pamphlet that somebody wrote. And I said, I believe it is our moral obligation to assess the campus's social and political atmosphere in relation to ourselves and our respective third world communities, on and off campus. You are aware of what's going on, you are aware of issues, and obviously you have an obligation to see what you can do, and everybody else, what you can do to try and explain to others why. The other thing I would say, I have a son and his wife there. They work at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's a liberal campus. Whoa, not as liberal as here, a liberal campus. But I just spent a month in Michigan on a lake. And on that lake, they had pontoons with support Trump. We need to remember that while you're trying to convince your own parents and friends of why things need to change or why things are happening, you also need to make sure that you understand that that is not necessarily the case other places. And I would hope those of you, once you leave this school, hopefully you can go to these other parts of the country and have some influence, because as I said, I mean, you know, we're in California, we're in San Francisco, but other parts of the country really do not agree with much you've heard today. And the problem is, it's almost, in my opinion, worse today. Not in the same respect, because you do have representation and stuff like that, but boy, the politics of today are very scary, and we could do things way back then, and we still have to. So I'll add, because other people may have questions. Thank you.
Before I begin this question, I would like to acknowledge the occupied land that we stand on, the Bermutush and Omi people. And my question is for, I just want to thank each and one of y'all for being here, and others that haven't been not being able to come, and others that have gone to the spirit world and are our ancestors now. What criticism or what critiques or adjustments would y'all have done different, and like what do you see also, because just, you know, right now, you know, there's a lot of things going on around the world, you know, Hong Kong, you know, there's a lot of political unrest, and I just want to know what adjustments can we make as the future generations to make sure our future generations like could inherit a better world for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, if you don't mind, there's a couple of things I would like right off the top is that we really fail to appreciate the talent, work, and abilities of women during this 6 years. Looking back on that period, the body of work that the women performed was extraordinary. And I want to say that for other than Roy Harrison and maybe one other male, the whole legal defense system that made it able for us to continue to bring people out of jail and back on the picket line was handled by women. I'd go beyond that to the work that I did with LASO and saw the leadership that came out of the Black Panther Party as more and more men were being assassinated by the FBI and the police department. The black women's leadership was extraordinary. We talk about maintaining a focus on the community and the orientation of what the concerns of the community were articulated over and over and over again by their leadership and their commitment in terms of seeing to it that their programs addressed the concerns of their families, their children, and the community. They were just really exceptional. The other thing that I would go back to and just move on to other mistakes would be on my own part. When I left the campus in the spring of '69 after the strike, I got involved into some differences with Dr. Juan Martinez. And you've all heard of how significant he was in regards to the development of not only the Chicano Latino clubs, but also the development of TWLF. But he and I got into some personality issues, and we broke a relationship and unfortunately it impacted our relationship between the LASO organization and the campus. And so that was another mistake, right? But also want to acknowledge the contribution by not only Dr. Juan Martinez, but also Chiri Contreras and
Juan
Pifere was just an exceptional human being. He was from Argentina and had a lot to do with my education in regards to U.S. involvement in Latin America. You know, so I mean, these folks are just totally memorable and supportive. On top of that, Carmen and Wong, Chewy, Dr. Rivera were all part of putting together, Dr. Wong, putting together the LASO studies. And again, I mean, I relate this back to you as students to appreciate the fact that that program was essentially built by students, graduate students, undergraduate students, and the willingness to step forward and put together the curriculum and deal with all the issues that had to be dealt with in regards to getting it solidified.
Can I add one thing? I want to mention Sonny Arenito. Sonny Arenito was part of PACE. He was actually Native American. He left and he's been across the bay for many years. The other important thing, and I get this, after the strike was all over, we had a political group called Power to the People. I don't know if people remember that. And it was for student body elections. And as was said earlier, basically the liberal leftist side had taken over the student government and we controlled the budget. I know I was chair of the finance committee for quite some time. And that helped fund the work study and all these other sort of things. I think one of the biggest mistakes we made after the strike was we could have controlled the student government. We ran on Power to the People and we won. We won the election. Hayakawa invalidated the election. He went ahead and he invalidated the election. And we decided we were going to stand on principle and boycotted the election. So the next election, the other side won automatically because there was nobody, and that went to court, and the court decided, well, it was a valid election. As I think back, we probably shouldn't have done that. We probably should have participated. So sometimes you stand on principle. You really need to evaluate whether you really want to do that or you want to see what your chances are of winning. And you should not always just think, I'm going to stand on principle, particularly if you can win.
I'd like to, I think that one of the real mistakes we made was that we allowed much of the leadership of both the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front to be arrested and put away. A number of us went to jail. Also, a number of us went to prison. And therefore, much of some of the ending aspects of the strike, the settlement, whatever, was hampered because many of the people who were working diligently to bring about some of these important things were not there. Also, I think we made a mistake in not bringing the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front even closer together. I think that, and the result of that was many of the time the things that were said or things that were spoken were noticeably done by the black leadership. And I think that had we not allowed that type of continuum to continue, had we let Ron Quidachay or Mason Wong or Raji Alvarado or Carmen or Donna or other people who were just as knowledgeable, just as articulate, speak on some of those issues, I think that we would then not have been so isolated. I think that it is imperative that you understand today, as we began to understand 50 years ago, that our commonalities, the oppression that we all are suffering from, is much more overwhelming than the differences that settler colonialists put in our heads and make us believe as important as the differences are important. It's really, really important that we understand what our unity and what our principles of unity are. These are some of these things are philosophical, some of them are ideological, some of them are political, and some of them are relational. And it's important that just as we should have learned 50 years ago, you must learn today that you work with people based upon your commonalities. That you do not allow white supremacy. You do not allow fascism to come in and grow these seeds of separation. This is vitally important today as it was 50 years ago, and will be important ongoing.
One of the things about the third origin front, one time Carrillo got me and Don Smothers, me and member Central and Don Smothers, member Presidium, took us over to Berkeley because it was happening to struggle in Berkeley too. What happened over there is that the black students over in Berkeley told the white students that they were going to have some kind of cotillion or some kind of something for them to stop. So Carmen took us over there to this auditorium, and this auditorium filled with white students. I mean, it was packed, more double here, you know what I mean? So he told them white students, the hell with them, the black students said, the struggle must continue. You're not going to take one group of students because of their interest to stop the struggle. So in other words, basically, one of the most important things I understand to deal with as Crutchfield, women must be the leaders of the struggle. Must be the leaders of the struggle. But not only a purpose, because basically all indigenous societies before the creation of Catholic Church and all that other stuff, right? Christianity, were women. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, no matter what, the struggle must be about all people. And basically at this particular time, class is very important, class. Because right now, middle class is deteriorating. In fact, all these what you call these loans they didn't put on y'all, y'all gotta be voting against that. That's absurd.
Question in the back?
Yes, my name is Lisa Gutierrez Guzman, and I'm a veteran of the strike. But I'm going to talk about one minority, or that was a term that oftentimes people used back then, but that was not mentioned. The group of people that are multiracial like myself. My great-grandfather was a Buffalo soldier, African American. My father was from the Philippines, from Chinese and Spanish background, etc. My mom was from Pilipino, Arkansas. Caucasian and Native American. So I really was mixed. So when I got involved in the strike, I just turned 18. And the very next month, the strike happened. And I said, well, where do I go? And what do I do? And to be honest, I did check out PACE. My dad was born and raised in the Philippines. And I agree with your constructive criticism there, that it wasn't exactly the most militant one in the world. I eventually joined the Strike Support Committee, which some people call the White Strike Support Committee, and I joined Students for a Democratic Society. But looking back, the commonalities are what worked for us. That's how we won the strike, because we had people of all different ethnicities participating in the strike, including a whole bunch of people that were not at all third world. So I think you have to remember that, because we may not have won it if we had not had so much of the campus shut down.
Exactly. That's it. I think we've heard from various of us, and we've talked about our difficulties getting together and overcoming obstacles, whether they were interpersonal or ideological, but we overcame them because that's what it's about. We have to be together, we have to overcome our difficulties, we have to coalesce, and we have to move forward. 50 years ago, we were part of a historical movement. We weren't just individuals who wanted to do things. There was something going on all over. Vietnam was ravaging Southeast Asia. Our black and brown soldiers were coming home in body bags. We were being repressed in our freedom of speech. All of these things were happening. The House Un-American Activities Committee was holding hearings, trying to get good people behind bars. Several of us, I'm not going to name names or say who, but we were persecuted by the FBI, by the Secret Service, and by other agencies of government. Why am I saying that? Because I think today there's a similar thing going on. I mean, history has put us today in a situation. I don't know if it's equal or worse, but it's bad. And there were terrible things going on throughout the world, and we cannot, just go to our class and not think about what's going on. We can't alienate ourselves from the suffering of our brothers and sisters elsewhere. So we have to, just be. Who are we? We are part of our humanity. We need to be active. We need to overcome our personality conflicts, our ideological issues, and we need to move forward together.
I have a question about blockbusting and how it affected students at San Francisco State who were working in the community at that time. But first I want to find out how many people in this audience, by a show of hands, know what blockbusting was. Virtually, maybe 90% of you don't know. I want to point out that I got arrested and some people lucked out because of getting arrested. I interviewed for a job at the University of Houston where I now live, and when the students saw that I had been arrested and they were interviewing people to become campus activities advisors, they saw that I'd been arrested and convicted, and they said, "He's our boy," and I ended up getting a job at the University of Houston. Okay, but in the city of Houston, blockbusting was rampant, and it was rampant across the United States. It led to a separation between whites and blacks and lots of hostility. It's not covered in the textbooks, and that's horrific. But I would like the panel to talk about what was going on in San Francisco, if anything, in terms of blockbusting, and if anything, what the students who were students here at the time did about it.
You're talking about redlining.
No, redlining is separate from blockbusting.
This is a good discussion, but our panel is over now. And
There's one student who's been standing for a while. She's over there. Is that, or are you just holding the mic? Or you? Oh.
okay.
This is right there. This one right there.
My name is Alvarado. I'm an LTNS major and on minor. I want to thank y'all for your efforts and the struggle you participated in to allow people like me and generations to, expand and further ethnic studies. I want to address what Roger said in the beginning and what Nesbit said about fascism and not allowing it to spread. This school, in my time at the school, I faced a lot of adversities just involved with student activism and everything. As you know, there's Zionists organizing on campus. They've got their settlement. Arab and Muslim students are constantly and faculty are constantly under attack. There's several Title IX cases that are being ignored. There's a lot of problems, and I think what it all comes down to is people's apathy, you know, in terms of organizing, and that's mainly why nothing's going down. And also administrative, like the administrative bureaucracy, how it has completely choked student activism through time, place, and manner regulations, and you know, just scare tactics, right? And losing your position here at school, or you know, your job or whatever. So I just want to address that, and how do we move forward the apathy and institutional blockage when it comes to activism and fighting passion. Thank you.
We can still talk.
Okay, so one of the things is trying to deal with the bureaucracy and administrative control, the limitations that they placed on students. So what happened during the strike and right after the strike is that the state moved in, the CSU moved in and put the kibosh down on student funding. So everything became much more complicated and difficult in order for it to happen. Looking at what is possible, especially if you have to deal with elections being voided, then I think what you're talking about is developing an alternative student body identity, right? And that means that you begin to coalesce around particular groups who want to be represented and have a voice, and who come together to speak in a common cause. And that as that body grows, you begin to challenge the existing structure as to who's really representing the interests of the students. When you consider the amount of money that the students are contributing to the operation of the institution, you begin to realize what the core of your strength is, right? Because you're not only talking about yourselves and your financial investment, you're also talking about your families and their investment, right? What are the consequences of you coming to this school, paying this price to go to this school? You can talk to any student on this campus about that, and you would have a hard time finding somebody who would not have some identity in what you're talking to them about. There's two, you can look at this two ways, right? One of them is to go try to get within the system. At the same time, the alternative is to do something more independent that would give you a lot more independence to be able to move and have a voice, right? This system has so many different ways of neutralizing and or eliminating any kind of action you want to get involved in, which is why we want to look at doing things more on an independent basis. You can identify yourselves as students of this campus, but you can also identify yourselves as students of CSU. If you are serious in terms of addressing the conditions of the tuition you're being paid, you need to establish relationships with other campuses, with other students, not necessarily with the associated students. You can use that as an avenue, but if you're really serious in terms of addressing it and building a base upon which you can go after, not that you can go after tuition, which would include your families and your communities, right? Because it's also in their interest to see that these tuition issues are resolved and they're more affordable, right? This is crazy, right? We pay $48 to go to school, right? If you multiply that times 40, you guys are still paying more than that for the student who are going to school here. If you look at the cost of living between now and then, it hasn't gone up 40 times. And yet, that's exactly where you are in terms of what you're paying for what you get. You're not getting what you're paying for. And you need to hold people accountable for that. And you need to do that as a block, not just as San Francisco State, but as a whole coalition of students and their families addressing what's happening. One other thing for me is the lack of access to your representatives on all levels, right? And so, along with the idea of bringing people together to deal with tuition, I ask you to consider the possibility of going after recall. Going after some kind of statute that would make it possible for citizens to recall their representatives when they don't act in their interest. until we have something, we need to grapple with the politicians that supposedly represent us. We are going to continue to be pawns. They will continue to not be responsive to our needs, nor our requests for any kind of action. So seriously, one of the bottom lines in terms of getting a handle on what's going on with the lack of democracy in this country, we have to be able to go out to the politicians and make them pay the consequences for not responding to our needs.